Hello and welcome to my channel, Geri in Stitches, where I share my love for sewing. And thank you for joining me today in my process of making Chinese frog buttons from scratch. The making of these buttons start with cutting bias strips, which are cut at a 45-degree angle to the grain line of the fabric. These strips are 1.5 inches wide and at least 18 inches long, and will be used to make quarter-inch straps so that we can fashion the buttons out of these straps. You can choose to make the buttons out of ready-made cording from the store, but I prefer to use hand-cut bias strips because they provide some stretch and malleability to the buttons. After cutting, fold the strips lengthwise with right sides facing and with the folded edge aligned with the 1 centimeter mark or 3/8 of an inch mark, sew the first line of stitching at the machine. I use a zigzag stitch of 0.5 width and 2.5 length for bias straps. As you can see, after sewing the first line of stitching, the zigzag stitch allows for and moves with the stretch of the bias. That's why I use a zigzag stitch instead of a straight stitch when sewing bias straps. When the first line of stitching is done, I sew a second line of stitching right next to it at the quarter-inch mark. I always apply 2 lines of stitching to my bias straps to strengthen and reinforce them. So when the stitching is done, we can trim off the raw edges so that we can turn the strap right side out properly. The seam allowance will sit comfortably within the strap after this trimming. As you can see, I am trimming off about 1/8 of an inch off the seam allowance. And next, with a looped turner, turn the strap right side out. Make sure the prongs of the loop turner are catching tightly onto the fabric before turning. It usually takes some effort to start, but once the end of the fabric starts to turn, the rest easily follows. Then the ends of the strap might have to be teased out with a set of tweezers. What comes next might be a bit of an annoying task, but an unavoidable one. Gently coax the strap to lay flat and folded at the seam line with the fingers. And this has to be done throughout the length of the strap to remove any bumpiness created by the seam allowance that is now encased within the strap. And when that is done, then we can bring this to the ironing station and press the strap to give it sharp folds and seal in the shape of the quarter-inch width of the strap. And now we're ready to tie the knot of the Chinese frog button. To start tying the panko or the Chinese knot, I'm going to take the bias binding that we just made, and on one end there's going to be a shorter side that is about 1 palm's length. That's when I'm going to start winding the binding over my index finger. Okay, and then right underneath the index finger is going to be my thumb. I'm going to wind on the longer end over the thumb this way. Okay, and then I've created a loop over the thumb, and that is going to go around. I'm going to pick up that loop to sort of go over the binding around the index finger. Okay, now before I go any further, I'm just going to make a small adjustment to flip it around so that everything just lays flat. Okay, and then I'm going to lift up to create a hole here, and then the shorter end is going to go below the longer end. I'm going to thread this through the loop that I just made. Okay. Now if I start to tighten on both ends, you will start to see sort of a design taking place. And this is where we want to get to at this point in time. Okay, look, it is still wrapped through my index finger. Now in the center of this sort of like an infinity pattern, like 2 figure eights sort of intertwined, and there's a center, see here, an opening. What I'm going to do is that the longer end is going to come around, and between the binding that is wrapped around my finger and the shorter end, I'm going to put the longer end through. Okay. And bring it up through that center hole. Okay. So we've just looped it through this way, right? And you will see that it's coming out through the center hole of the initial sort of double infinity pattern. And then I'm going to take now the shorter end, wrap it through, and between my finger, the loop here, and the one here, I'm going to put it in between and try to get this through that same center hole. Okay. There. So now we have both ends coming through the same hole. And then you can sort of tug gently to kind of bring it all in as much as possible together. Okay. Now, the loop that is around my index finger is kind of like the heart of the knot. And I'm taking a thread and looping this so that I know where the heart of the knot is. Okay, and it's very important to always have a sense of where the heart of the knot is, because right now we're going to start tugging to tighten the knot. And if you do not know where the heart is, you're going to lose it in the midst of all the tightening. So first we can sort of it's a little bit of a finding our way. You sort of have to follow like where you're tightening, and I always kind of want to see where I can start to reduce the loop, the length of the loop, which is the heart. Okay, you just kind of need your eyes to navigate how this, and you just follow it. Just keep following it. Okay, and then pull through, right? Okay. So you see how it's slowly coming together, but it can still, and again, I don't want to lose that heart. And I'm just gonna keep doing this to keep tightening. Oh, and there it is. And I'm always checking in on the heart of the knot, right? So that it doesn't get lost. Mm. And then when things start to get tighter and it's more challenging for your fingers to be taking off the slack, you can get some help with a pair of tweezers to help you with this. So just be careful not to poke holes in your fabric as you're doing this. And I'm pretty much done, I think. There. That was probably the final tug. Just kind of shape it, mold it a little bit with your hands. And again, it's important that I don't know if you can see, but the heart of the knot is clear. It's not lost inside the knot. And you can see a pattern of the binding going around, surrounding the heart. Okay. And then with a pair of these tweezers, we can remove this. There. So this is what it looks like. Now there are different ways of cutting off or shaping or deciding how you want the knot to look like or the button to look like. You can have the bindings lay flat, and then that's what the button will look like. Or you can also construct the button this way. Okay. Whatever it is, for this size knot, I think what looks nice is maybe it should at least be 1.5 inches from the bottom of the knot. Okay, so let's just say we've decided on 1.5 inches. You want to mark where that is, and then leave another 1/2 inch so that we can sew up the ends together. Okay, and I like to mark it all the way around. Okay. And then you can cut it off here. And so with the length of, you actually need to start with a longer length of binding to get here, and then the leftover can be used to make the loop that secures the knot. And now let's, I'll show you how to sew up the ends and also create the loop that secures the button. So the way I'm constructing this button is that the axis at the ends are going to be folded in, and I'm going to sew it up so that when the button is placed on the garment, it's going to look something like this. Okay, so there's sort of like a heart shape at the end of the button. Now, bias binding, when you cut it at a 90-degree angle to the length of the bias binding, it always expands. So what I do is I cut it at a 45-degree angle so that that expansion is minimized. Okay, so then I'm folding it like this. All right, so first I'm gonna connect the two ends together with a blanket stitch. And what I like to do is to start on this end. It's just a sort of like a simple way to close up the raw edges. It's going to be closed up anyway, so because it's going to be hidden inside the button, but this is sort of like a neat way to bring them together. So here's the quick stitches just to keep the ends together, and at the same time it reduces fraying on the ends. Right? Okay, so now I can turn it around. There. Here. And then right now I'm just closing it off with a stitch. And it's a very simple stitch just to bring the two ends together. Or the side ends. When I come close to the bottom of the knot, I'm leaving some room. I'm not sewing it all the way towards the knot, because that would give it some like breathing space to sort of collapse when the loop goes around it, goes around the knot. And then I am securing this side with a knot and then moving on to the other side, okay, directly across. And I'm gonna sew exactly the same all the way till here, okay. Okay, so I sort of want to keep the heart shape here, so I'm not going to sew it all the way to the end, right? And okay, and then a final stitch, and also a knot here to secure all of it, right? And I'm just going to bring it over to the other end and cut off the thread. Okay, so basically this is what the knot looks like. And then we're gonna make the loop. It's the same technique, making the loop. You just have to measure it off to the right measurement. And okay, when we put the loop through, you see you need at least about this amount. So you want to mark that. You need and let's see, for this size knot, you need the loop to be at least at least 7/8 of an inch long for the loop, right? So we're going to do the same thing here. You can sew it up in exactly the same way, just folding these under like this, okay, leaving that heart shape. So you're going to sew it the way that I showed you, all the way here, and then go across and sew all the way to the other end. And then you would have the loop. Okay. And I just sewed it up with the way that I recommended, with the heart shape at the end. And it looks a little bit like a fish, the loop. It's secured here and it's secured here, right? And leaving enough space so that the knot can go through easily and will be secured. And this is how it's going to look on the garment, right? Now, different people can create other decorative shapes with the binding, but this is, I guess, the most basic and simple shape for knot, Chinese knot button. Now here's a demonstration of how I attach a set of Chinese frog buttons to my garment. These buttons come together at the center front of my garment, and when the knot and the loop are detached, you can see that both knot and loop extend a little bit past the center front line for the center of the button to be aligned at center front. So I've made markings for where my next set of buttons are going to be attached. And each button is going to be attached to the garment by placing it like so. And I usually like to start sewing them at the tail of the button. And I am using these markings to help me align my button on to the garment. The stitch I am using is a very basic stitch, just simply connecting the edge of the button to the fabric of the button. As you can see, I start with securing one side of the heart shape of the tail first, then connect the whole length of the button until I get close to the bottom of the knot. And if you like this content, please subscribe to my channel, leave a comment, give a thumbs up. I really value your support, and I hope to see you soon with another video. But keep watching for the whole demonstration for this how to sew on the button. And at this point, I am going to tie a knot here before I move over to the other side of the length of the button. And now I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side of the button. And again, I'm just attaching this. You can start with a knot here at the bottom of the knot of the button, and then continue sewing down the length of the body of the button until you get to the heart-shaped tail, and then keep sewing around the other half of the heart-shaped tail and tie another knot, and that's pretty much it. I continue recording this whole process so that you, in case you need it as a reference to see how it is done, how I sew on a frog button onto my garment. And you can see that when it is sewn on, it's gonna stand on the narrow edge of the button when we are sewing on both sides of the frog button onto the garment. After I sew on the half of the button that contains the knot, I will do exactly the same thing to the other side of the button that contains the loop. And that is how I attach both the knot of the button onto the garment and the loop of the button onto the garment. Here's why I really love Chinese frog buttons. Because they are made of bias binding, they stretch slightly and are flexible, allowing them to hang and move gracefully with the fabric, especially lighter and more delicate fabrics. They also withstand wear and tear and protect the dress fabric because they are sewn over a larger surface area, distributing the tension and strain applied to the fabric. So go ahead, make some frog buttons! Wishing all of you happy, joyous, and blessed sewing.